Hello and welcome. Take a deep breath and allow yourself to settle in comfortably. Tonight, we're going on a journey together, a peaceful journey through one of gaming's most beautifully crafted worlds. This is the complete story of Divinity Original Sin, told slowly and gently, designed to help you relax and drift into peaceful sleep. There's no rush here, no urgency, just the slow, steady unfolding of an epic tale from the world of Rivellon. A story of magic and mystery, of heroes and sacrifice, of sisterly bonds broken and restored. Let the words wash over you like gentle waves, carrying you deeper into relaxation with each passing moment. Close your eyes if you'd like, or keep them softly focused. Either way is perfect. What matters is that you're comfortable, safe, and ready to let go of the tensions of your day. As we journey through this tale together, feel free to drift in and out of awareness. There's no need to follow every detail. The story will continue whether you're listening actively or letting it become a gentle background for your dreams. Rivellon is a world much like our own in some ways. There are cities and forests, heroes and villains, love and loss. But it's also a world touched by magic, where the very fabric of reality can be shaped by those who understand the ancient forces that flow through all living things. This magic is called Source, and it lies at the heart of our story tonight. Imagine, if you will, a world where magic was once pure and benevolent. A world where those gifted with magical abilities used their power only for good, healing the sick, protecting the innocent, nurturing the natural world. This was Rivellon in its golden age before the corruption came, before everything changed. But change did come, as it always does. And with that change came darkness, chaos, and a threat that would eventually endanger not just Rivellon, but all of existence itself. This is where our story truly begins, not with the heroes we'll come to know, but with the ancient forces that shaped their destiny long before they were born. So settle deeper into your pillows now. Let your breathing become slow and steady. Feel the weight of your body sinking into the mattress beneath you. And as you relax more and more with each breath, we'll begin our journey through the complete tale of Divinity Original Sin. The story starts centuries before our heroes first drew breath, in a time when source magic flowed pure and untainted through the world. In the beginning, there was Rivellon, a world blessed with an extraordinary form of magical energy known as Source. This wasn't just another type of magic, it was something far more fundamental, more pure. Source was intimately connected to Astarte, the goddess of life herself, flowing from her divine essence into the world like light from the sun. Those who could wield Source were called sorcerers, and they were revered throughout the land. These weren't the dark wizards of fearful tales, but healers and protectors, guardians of the natural order. They could mend broken bones with a touch, cure diseases that would otherwise prove fatal, and even commune with the very essence of life itself. Villages would celebrate when a child was discovered to have the gift of Source, knowing that person would grow to be a blessing to their community. The sorcerers built great halls of learning where they shared their knowledge freely. They established sanctuaries where the wounded and sick could come for healing. They worked the fields alongside farmers, using their magic to ensure bountiful harvests. They stood watch over villages at night, their power forming barriers against the wild things that might threaten sleeping families. This was the golden age of Rivellon, a time of peace and prosperity that would later be remembered with bittersweet longing. But we must understand something important about Source magic, something that would prove crucial to everything that followed. Source wasn't just a tool to be used. It was a living connection to the fundamental forces of creation. When sorcerers used their power, they were drawing upon the very essence of life itself, channeling Astarte's divine energy through their mortal forms. This connection made them powerful, yes, but it also made them vulnerable to corruption in ways that other magic users were not. For ages, this vulnerability remained theoretical, a distant concern that philosophers might discuss in abstract terms but which had no practical impact on daily life. The sorcerers were careful in their practice, respectful of the great responsibility they carried. They understood that their gift came with a duty to use it wisely and well. Then came the void. The void was and is difficult to describe in terms that mortal minds can fully grasp. It's not simply darkness or emptiness, though those words come close. The void is entropy incarnate, the antithesis of creation, the ultimate enemy of all that lives and grows and changes. It exists beyond the material world, in spaces between reality where the laws of nature break down and meaning itself begins to dissolve. For countless eons, the void had been contained, imprisoned by ancient powers beyond even the understanding of the gods. But prisons, no matter how strong, can be breached, and when the void finally found a crack in its containment, it reached out with tendrils of corrupting energy, seeking anything it could taint, anything it could use as a gateway into the world of light and life. It found source magic. The corruption happened slowly at first, so gradually that no one noticed the change. A sorcerer here or there would experience strange dreams, disturbing visions of infinite emptiness. They would wake feeling different somehow, though they couldn't quite articulate how. Their magic still worked indeed. It seemed to work even better than before, more powerful and easier to control. This should have been the first warning sign, but in their innocence, the sorcerers celebrated what they thought was a natural evolution of their abilities. But power that comes too easily always carries a hidden cost. As more and more sorcerers unknowingly drew upon source that had been tainted by the void's influence, the corruption spread like invisible poison through their community. Their healing spells began to have unexpected side effects. The barriers they created to protect villages started to feel wrong somehow, oppressive rather than comforting. And slowly, inevitably, the sorcerers themselves began to change. Where once they had been gentle and compassionate, they grew cold and distant. Where they had sought to nurture life, they became fascinated with death and decay. The magic that had once healed began to harm instead. Spells that should have protected became weapons of destruction. And through it all, the sorcerers convinced themselves that they were still doing good, still serving the greater purpose, even as they left trails of suffering in their wake. This corruption of source magic represented one of the greatest tragedies in Rivellon's history. Something beautiful and pure had been twisted into its opposite, and the very people who should have been the world's greatest protectors became its most dangerous threat. Villages that had once welcomed sorcerers now barred their gates against them. Parents who had hoped their children might manifest magical ability now prayed desperately that they would not. The Golden Age was over, though few yet realized just how dark the coming age would be. And in this time of growing darkness, there arose one sorcerer whose name would echo through history as a symbol of everything source magic had become. His name was Braccus Rex, and he would become the living embodiment of corruption and tyranny. But before we delve into his dark reign, take a moment to breathe deeply. Let the weight of this history settle gently into your consciousness. Feel yourself sinking deeper into relaxation. As we prepare to continue our journey, the corruption of source wasn't an immediate catastrophe. It took decades, perhaps even centuries, for the full extent of the change to become apparent. During this time, the world of Rivellon continued much as it always had, with most people unaware of the shadow that was gradually spreading over their reality. Farmers still tended their fields, merchants still plied their trades, and children still played in village squares, their laughter ringing clear in the air. But those who paid attention, those who remembered how things used to be, began to notice disturbing patterns. The sorcerers who had once been pillars of their communities were withdrawing, becoming isolated and secretive. Some disappeared entirely, venturing into forgotten places and abandoned ruins, seeking knowledge that had been deliberately hidden for good reason. Others remained in society but changed in fundamental ways, their eyes taking on a distant, cold quality that made ordinary people uncomfortable. The healing halls where sorcerers had once freely offered their gifts began to demand payment, not just in coin, but in stranger currencies. A sorcerer might heal a farmer's dying child, but ask in return for the farmer's dreams, or his memories of joy, or his love for his family. These transactions seemed harmless enough at first, abstract prices for concrete benefits, but those who made such bargains found themselves hollowed out in ways they couldn't quite explain, as if something essential had been taken from them along with the abstract payment. The natural world, which had always been so responsive to source magic, began to react with distress to its corrupted form. Trees would wither when corrupted sorcerers passed too close. Rivers would run black and foul. Animals fled in terror from the touch of source that had once comforted them. The land itself seemed to understand what the people were only beginning to suspect. That source had been fundamentally changed, transformed from a force of life into something that served death and entropy. It was during this time of gradual decline that the Council of Seven first convened. These 7 wise rulers, each governing their own region of Rivellon, recognized that something was profoundly wrong. They came together in secret, away from the eyes and ears of the sorcerers who had once been their allies and advisors. For days and nights, they debated what should be done. Some argued that the sorcerers simply needed guidance, that they had lost their way but could be brought back to righteousness through wisdom and patience. Others, more pragmatic or perhaps simply more observant, understood that the corruption ran too deep for such gentle solutions. They had seen what corrupted source could do. They had witnessed the transformation of people they had known and trusted into beings that wore familiar faces but possessed hearts of darkness. They knew that if nothing was done, if the corruption was allowed to spread unchecked, it would eventually consume everything. The decision the Council of Seven reached was not made lightly. It went against everything Rivellon's culture had taught for generations, that sorcerers were to be honored, protected, and respected. But desperate times, as the saying goes, call for desperate measures. The council decreed that a new order would be formed, an elite group of warriors specifically trained to fight against corrupted source magic. They would be called Source Hunters, and their mandate would be clear and terrible: to eradicate the source menace from Rivellon, one corrupted sorcerer at a time. The creation of the Source Hunters marked a fundamental shift in how Rivellon understood magic and its place in society. No longer would source wielders be automatically trusted. No longer would their gifts be seen as purely beneficial. Instead, they would be hunted, contained, and eliminated if they showed any sign of corruption. It was a tragic necessity, born from the betrayal of trust and the perversion of something once beautiful. And so began a long and terrible war between the Source Hunters and the corrupted sorcerers. It would be a war measured not in months or years, but in generations. A war that would reshape Rivellon's landscape, both physical and cultural. A war that would culminate in a confrontation with the most dangerous sorcerer of all, the tyrant who ruled from his fortress on an island called Reaper's Eye, the man known as Braccus Rex. But even as you listen to these words, let them begin to fade. Let the details blur softly at the edges. Feel yourself drifting on the tide of history, like a leaf floating downstream. There's no need to hold on to every fact, every name. Simply let the story wash over you, carrying you deeper into peaceful rest. Breathe deeply now, and let us speak of Braccus Rex, though we'll speak softly, for even his name carries weight in the history of Rivellon. He was not born evil, few truly are. But power, especially power drawn from a corrupted source, has a way of transforming those who wield it, shaping them into twisted reflections of their former selves. Braccus was once a scholar, it's said, a man devoted to understanding the mysteries of source magic. In his youth, before the corruption fully took hold, he appears to have genuinely sought knowledge for the betterment of all. Based on what we know of his early work, he seems to have believed that by understanding source more deeply, he could help sorcerers use their gifts more effectively, heal more people, protect more lives. His intentions, at the beginning at least, appear to have been pure. But the corrupted source that flowed through him, that connected him to the void beyond reality, slowly warped his perceptions and his purposes. The knowledge he sought became darker, more focused on control than healing, on domination rather than protection. He began to see other people not as fellow souls deserving of respect and compassion, but as resources to be used, tools to serve his increasingly grandiose visions. His sister, whose name has been lost to history, was one of the first to notice the change in him. She pleaded with him to step back from his obsessive studies, to remember the person he had once been. But Braccus had gone too far down his dark path to turn back. He saw her concern not as love but as weakness, her compassion not as strength but as a limitation that prevented her from seeing the glorious future he was building. Eventually, Braccus took control of a region of Rivellon through a combination of magical power and ruthless cunning. He established his seat of power on the island of Reaper's Eye, in a fortress called Fort Joy, a name that would become bitterly ironic as the true nature of his rule became clear. From this fortress, he extended his control over the surrounding lands, demanding tribute and absolute obedience from all who fell under his domain. But Braccus understood something that many tyrants fail to grasp. True power comes not just from the ability to destroy, but from the ability to contain and control. He couldn't rule through fear alone if his subjects could simply flee or if rival sorcerers could challenge his authority. So he devoted his formidable intellect to creating tools and techniques for containing source magic itself. In the depths of Fort Joy, Braccus established workshops and laboratories where he experimented endlessly. He developed collars that could suppress a sorcerer's abilities, turning powerful magic users into helpless prisoners. He created dungeons where source magic would be drained away, leaving those imprisoned there hollow shells of their former selves. He even devised techniques for purging source from people entirely, destroying their magical abilities permanently in the process. These inventions were not motivated by any desire to help Rivellon combat the corruption of source. Braccus had no interest in solving problems or healing wounds. Instead, he sought to ensure that no one could rival his power, that every other sorcerer in his domain would be dependent on his mercy. He wanted to be not just a king, but a god, the sole source of magical power in his realm. The suffering Braccus inflicted during his reign is difficult to contemplate, especially here in the peaceful darkness of your room, where you're safe and warm. So we won't dwell on the details. It's enough to know that he ruled with cruelty, that he saw compassion as weakness, and that under his reign, Fort Joy became synonymous with torture and despair rather than the happiness its name suggested. But as terrible as Braccus was, his reign also sparked the response that would eventually end it. His cruelty and the obvious danger he represented to all of Rivellon galvanized the Council of Seven into action. They had been discussing the creation of source hunters, but Braccus's rise to power made the need immediate and urgent. Here was proof, living and terrible, of exactly what corrupted source could do in the hands of someone brilliant and ruthless. The council decreed that the source hunters would be formed immediately, and they would be given a clear first mission: the defeat of Braccus Rex. This would not be easy. Braccus was perhaps the most powerful sorcerer alive, and his fortress was well defended by both magical and mundane means. But the source hunters had advantages that ordinary soldiers did not. The source hunters were trained specifically to recognize and combat source magic. While most people couldn't detect source unless it was being actively used, source hunters learned to sense its presence like a bloodhound following a scent. They could identify sorcerers in a crowd, detect enchanted objects hidden in innocent-seeming containers, and sense when source magic was being prepared even before it was cast. Moreover, the source hunters were trained to fight without relying on magic themselves. This was crucial because they understood that source magic itself was corrupted and dangerous. They became masters of martial combat, of strategy and tactics, of using the environment, and clever planning to overcome opponents who possessed supernatural abilities. They learned to fight as teams, supporting each other and covering for each other's weaknesses, because they understood that no individual, no matter how skilled, could reliably defeat a powerful sorcerer alone. The war against Braccus Rex lasted for years. His fortress on Reaper's Eye was sieged multiple times, with terrible losses on both sides. Braccus's knowledge of source magic allowed him to create defenses that seemed impregnable, and his ruthlessness meant he had no qualms about sacrificing his own followers if it served his purposes. But slowly, steadily, the source hunters learned his patterns, adapted to his tactics, and pressed their advantage. The final confrontation came not through overwhelming force, but through cunning. A group of elite source hunters infiltrated Fort Joy, using the very tunnels and passages that Braccus had created for his experiments. They fought their way through his guards, disabled his magical defenses, and finally confronted the tyrant himself in his throne room. The battle was fierce and costly, but in the end, Braccus Rex fell. With his defeat, the immediate crisis ended. Fort Joy was liberated, though it would bear the scars of his rule for generations. The people who had suffered under his tyranny were freed, though many carried psychological and physical wounds that would never fully heal. And the Source Hunters, having proven their worth in necessity, established themselves as a permanent fixture of Rivellon society. But the defeat of Braccus Rex didn't solve the underlying problem. Source magic was still corrupted. Sorcerers throughout Rivellon were still dangerous, whether they realized it or not. The Source Hunters had won a battle, but the war, the long, grinding war, to protect Rivellon from the Source menace, had only just begun. For centuries after Braccus's fall, the Source Hunters maintained their vigilant watch. They hunted corrupted sorcerers throughout the land, always watching, always alert for signs of the corruption that had brought Rivellon to the brink of disaster. They became respected and feared in equal measure, seen as necessary protectors by some, and as brutal extremists by others. And so the world continued, season after season, generation after generation, with the Source Hunters standing guard against the danger of corrupted source magic. They kept detailed records of their hunts, developed better training methods, refined their techniques for detecting and combating source wielders. They became one of the most powerful and important organizations in all of Rivellon, their mandate clear and their authority rarely questioned. But as you listen to these words, perhaps already feeling sleep beginning to pull at the edges of your consciousness, remember that this is still just the prologue to our story. The true adventure, the one involving two particular Source Hunters who would discover truths far beyond anything their order had prepared them for, is still to come. Let yourself sink deeper now, deeper into comfort, deeper into rest. The history we've explored has prepared the ground, but the seeds of our actual story have not yet been planted. That will come soon, so soon. But for now, just breathe and drift. And allow the past of Rivellon to fade like morning mist. In the peaceful darkness where you rest, imagine now the world of Rivellon as it exists centuries after Braccus Rex's defeat. The sun rises over cities both ancient and new, casting long shadows across cobblestone streets. Merchants open their shops, farmers tend their fields, and children play games that have been passed down through generations. Life continues, as it always does, resilient and adaptable. But woven through this ordinary existence is the ever-present awareness of danger, the knowledge that source magic, though rare, still lurks in the world, corrupted and dangerous. And standing watch against this danger, operating in the shadows and the light both, are the Source Hunters. To understand our story, we must understand what it means to be a Source Hunter. These are not ordinary soldiers or simple guardians. They are individuals who have dedicated their entire lives to a single purpose, protecting Rivellon from the corrupted power of Source. From the moment they begin their training, often as young children, they are shaped into weapons against a very specific threat. The training of a Source Hunter is rigorous, demanding both physical prowess and mental discipline. They must become expert fighters, of course, capable of holding their own against opponents who possess supernatural abilities. They learn to use every weapon, to fight in every terrain, to adapt to any situation. But the martial training is only the beginning. Source Hunters must also develop the peculiar sense that allows them to detect source magic. This isn't something that comes naturally to most people. It must be cultivated through years of practice and exposure. Young trainees spend hours in meditation, learning to quiet their minds and sense the subtle energies that flow through the world. They study the telltale signs of source corruption, the slight distortion in the air around a sorcerer, the faint wrongness that corrupted source leaves in its wake, the way reality itself seems to shudder when source magic is being prepared. This sensitivity to source is crucial because corrupted sorcerers don't wear signs announcing their nature. They look like ordinary people. They live among regular folk, often unaware of what they carry inside them. Source magic can remain dormant for years, even decades, before manifesting. A person might grow to adulthood, marry, have children, build a life, all without knowing they possess this dangerous gift. Then one day, in a moment of stress or strong emotion, the source awakens and everything changes. This is why source hunters must remain vigilant always. They travel throughout Rivellon, moving from town to town, investigating reports of strange occurrences, mysterious deaths, or unexplained phenomena. They question witnesses, examine evidence, and follow leads wherever they might go. And when they identify a sorcerer, they must make difficult choices about what comes next. Not every sorcerer is immediately dangerous. Some, upon learning of their nature, willingly cooperate with the source hunters, seeking to have their abilities suppressed or contained before they can cause harm. These individuals understand that corrupted source is not a gift but a curse, and they prefer safety over power. The source hunters develop techniques for sealing away magical abilities, methods that are painful and permanent, but which protect both the former sorcerer and everyone around them. But others embrace their power once they discover it. They feel the intoxication of source magic flowing through them, the ability to shape reality with a thought, to wield power that makes them superior to ordinary mortals. These sorcerers see no reason to give up their gifts just because others fear them. They believe they can control the corruption, master it, use it without being used by it. History has proven them wrong time and time again, but the allure of power is strong, and there are always those who believe they'll be the exception. When a sorcerer refuses to submit to the source hunter's judgment, there's only one outcome. The source hunter must eliminate the threat before it can grow, before the corruption can spread, before innocent people suffer from magic they never asked to encounter. This burden, the responsibility of deciding who lives and who dies, of ending lives to protect lives, weighs heavily on every source hunter, shaping them in fundamental ways. Our two heroes, the source hunters, whose story we're telling tonight, carry this burden like all of their order. They have trained together for years, learning to work as a seamless team. Where one is strong, the other compensates. Where one hesitates, the other acts. They trust each other with their lives, because they've saved each other's lives more times than either can count. They're not young anymore, these two. They've seen enough to have lost some of their innocence, to understand that the world is more complicated than the simple categories of good and evil they were taught as trainees. They've made difficult choices, lived with regret, carried guilt for actions that were necessary but not painless. And yet they continue, because someone must. Because the alternative, a world where corrupted source runs free, is too terrible to contemplate. When we meet them at the beginning of our tale, they're receiving what appears to be a routine assignment. A town councillor has been murdered in Cyseal, a prosperous port city in southern Rivellon. The circumstances of the death suggest source magic was involved. The local authorities, out of their depth when dealing with supernatural threats, have requested source hunter assistance. It's exactly the sort of investigation our heroes have conducted dozens of times before. They pack their equipment with practiced efficiency. Weapons, of course, swords and bows, daggers and maces, each carefully maintained and ready for use. But also the specialized tools of their trade, artifacts that can detect source magic, talismans that provide some protection against magical attacks, scrolls containing counterspells for the most common forms of source manipulation. Everything they might need to investigate a murder, track a suspect, and if necessary, bring a dangerous sorcerer to justice. The journey to Cyseal should be straightforward, a simple matter of booking passage on a ship and sailing down the coast. They've made similar journeys countless times, traveling from one crisis to another, always ready to stand between innocent people and the dangers they cannot defend themselves against. This investigation, they assume, will be no different from many others. They'll arrive, examine the evidence, identify the responsible sorcerer, and deal with the situation according to their training and mandate. But fate, or perhaps something more directed than mere chance, has other plans. The ship carrying our heroes towards Cyseal is forced to make an emergency landing on a beach some distance from the city. The reason becomes clear as they disembark. Cyseal is under attack, besieged by orcs and undead forces that seem to have appeared from nowhere. This is unusual. While orc raids are not unheard of in Rivellon, they're typically small-scale affairs, opportunistic attacks rather than coordinated assaults. And the undead, well, necromancy is itself a form of corrupted magic, though distinct from source corruption. The combination of orcs and undead working together suggests something organized, something planned. This is no random occurrence. Our heroes, being who they are, don't hesitate. Yes, they're here to investigate a murder, but that investigation can wait if the city itself is in danger. They fight their way across the beach, cutting through orc troopers and shambling undead, working their way toward the city, where they can regroup with its defenders and learn what's truly happening. The beach battle is chaotic, desperate. Orcs charge with brutal weapons raised high, while undead shuffle forward with implacable determination, feeling no pain and showing no fear. But our source hunters are experienced warriors, and they know how to use the environment to their advantage. They position themselves to prevent being surrounded, use the terrain to funnel their enemies into kill zones, and support each other without needing to speak, their teamwork honed through years of fighting side by side. As they fight, they notice something disturbing. Among the attackers are human cultists, men and women wearing black robes marked with symbols our heroes don't immediately recognize. These cultists wield both conventional weapons and magic, casting spells that animate the dead and strengthen their orc allies. This is more than a simple raid. It's an organized assault with significant supernatural support. The presence of these cultists raises immediate questions. Who are they? What do they want with Cyseal? And most importantly, is their presence connected to the murder our heroes were sent to investigate? It seems too much of a coincidence for a counselor to die under mysterious circumstances, just before the city comes under assault by well-organized forces. Finally, after what feels like hours of fighting, but is probably only minutes, our heroes break through to the city proper. The gates of Cyseal stand open, defenders rushing back and forth as they try to organize a response to this unexpected attack. The city is in chaos, but it's still standing, still fighting, not yet overwhelmed by the forces arrayed against it. A guard captain spots our heroes, recognizes the distinctive armor and weapons that mark them as source hunters, and approaches with visible relief. "Thank the gods," he says. "We can use all the help we can get. But if you're the source hunters we sent for, you'll want to speak with Ahu inside the city. He's the one who requested your presence." Ahu. The name means nothing to our heroes yet, but they nod and make their way into Cyseal proper, ready to begin the investigation that brought them here. They don't yet know that this simple murder case will unravel into something far more complex and dangerous than they could imagine. They don't yet know that the attack on Cyseal is just one small piece of a conspiracy that threatens not just this city, but all of Rivellon, and perhaps even existence itself. But you, settling deeper into sleep now, don't need to worry about any of that yet. The heroes are safe for the moment, entering the city, ready to begin their investigation. The urgency of battle has faded into the controlled chaos of a city under siege. And as you drift further from waking consciousness, you can let the details blur, the specifics fade, knowing that the story will continue whether you're listening or dreaming. Let your breathing slow now. In and out, steady and peaceful. We're going to spend time in Cyseal, walking its streets, meeting its people, piecing together a mystery one clue at a time. There's a gentle rhythm to investigation, a methodical progression that can be quite soothing. Let that rhythm lull you deeper into rest. As we explore, Cyseal is a city of contrasts, where wealth and poverty exist side by side, where ancient traditions mix with new ideas from distant lands. The harbor bustles with activity even during the siege, as merchant ships come and go, their captains either brave or foolhardy, or simply too committed to profit to let a little thing like an orc attack interrupt trade. The smell of salt water mingles with the scents of cooking food, exotic spices, and the less pleasant aromas of too many people living in close quarters. Our source hunters make their way through winding streets toward the location where Ahu supposedly waits. Along the way, they observe the city's defenders preparing for the next assault, watch civilians boarding up windows and stockpiling supplies, see children being shepherded to safety by worried parents. Life continues even in crisis, adapting to the new reality, as humans have always done. They find Aru in what appears to be a comfortable home converted into a temporary command post. He's a wizard. That much is immediately clear from his robes and the way magical energy seems to shimmer faintly in the air around him. He's older than our heroes expected, his face lined with age and worry, his hands showing the slight tremor that comes with advanced years. But his eyes are sharp, intelligent, missing nothing as he studies the source hunters who have finally arrived. "You're here at last," Ahu says, his voice carrying the weight of relief and urgency both. "I was beginning to fear you wouldn't make it through the siege lines. We have a situation, a delicate situation, one that requires the particular expertise your order provides." He goes on to explain the circumstances that led him to request source hunter assistance. Councillor Jake, a respected member of Cyseal's government, was found dead in his room at the King Crab Inn 3 days ago. The official cause of death was listed as natural heart attack, common enough in a man of his age and stress level. But Ahu suspected something more sinister. "I examined the body," Aru explains, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, as if the walls themselves might be listening. "I found traces of source magic, faint but unmistakable to someone who knows what to look for. This was murder, committed using corrupted source, and that means there's a sorcerer loose in my city, hiding among the population, dangerous and undetected." The source hunters exchange glances. A sorcerer in Cyseal would be serious enough on its own, but combined with the current siege, it suggests possibilities that are even more troubling. Could the murder and the attack be connected? Is there a larger plot unfolding? Ahu provides them with the basic details of the case. Jake was found in his room by his wife, Esmeralda, when he failed to come down for breakfast. The door was locked from the inside, the windows secured. There were no signs of struggle, no obvious wounds. To all appearances, he had simply died in his sleep. But Ahu's magical examination revealed the truth traces of source manipulation in the corpse, evidence of magical interference with Jake's life force. Captain Aurelius of the Cyseal Legion has been investigating the murder from a conventional perspective, Ahu explains, but has made little progress. He'll provide the source hunters with access to the crime scene and witness statements, but beyond that, they're on their own. Time is of the essence both because a murderer remains free and because the siege makes normal investigation nearly impossible. Our heroes nod their understanding and prepare to begin their work. This is familiar territory for them, a murder to solve, a killer to find. The supernatural element makes it more complex than a typical case, but that's exactly why they're here. Let the mundane investigators handle mundane crimes. Source hunters deal with the dangerous intersection between magic and murder. Their first stop is the King Crab Inn, where the murder took place. The inn is a modest establishment, neither particularly wealthy nor especially poor, the sort of place that caters to middle-class merchants and minor officials. The innkeeper, a nervous man named Marcus, shows them to Jake's room with obvious reluctance, clearly uncomfortable with the attention this incident has brought to his establishment. The room itself is small but well appointed. A bed, a desk, a wardrobe, a wash basin. Nothing appears disturbed. If this was a murder scene, it was remarkably clean. Our heroes begin their examination methodically, starting with the obvious and working toward the subtle. They check the windows locked from the inside, as reported. They examine the door also locked from within, with no sign of tampering. They look for hidden entrances, secret passages, any mundane explanation for how a killer might have entered and exited. Finding nothing obvious, they turn to their specialized tools. One of our heroes produces a crystalline device that glows faintly when near source magic. As they move it around the room, it remains dark and inert until they pass it near the bed. There, it flares to brilliant light, confirming Ahu's assessment. Source magic was definitely used here, and recently. But the device can only confirm the presence of source, not reveal who wielded it or exactly how it was used. For that, they'll need to interview witnesses, examine evidence, and piece together the sequence of events that led to Jake's death. They'll need to do detective work, the slow and often tedious process of elimination and deduction that eventually reveals truth. Marcus the innkeeper tells them that Jake and his wife Esmeralda were regular guests, staying at the inn several nights each week due to Jake's work on the city council. They kept mostly to themselves, though Jake would sometimes share drinks with other guests in the common room. On the night of his death, Jake had dinner with his wife, then retired early, complaining of fatigue. Esmeralda stayed in the common room for another hour before joining him. When she entered the room, she found him apparently sleeping peacefully. She didn't realize he was dead until morning. It's a simple enough story, but something about it bothers our heroes. They've learned through experience that murders are rarely as simple as they initially appear. There are always complications, hidden motives, secrets that the involved parties would prefer to keep buried. They'll need to dig deeper, talk to more people, find the threads that don't quite match the official narrative. Their investigation leads them next to Roberts, the city's undertaker, who currently has Jake's body in his morgue. Roberts is a professional, clinical in his descriptions as he shows them the corpse. No visible wounds, he confirms. No poison in his system that I could detect. Every indication of a natural death. But Ahu insisted there was something magical about it, and I've learned to trust his instincts about such things. As our heroes examine the body more closely, they notice something Roberts missed, or perhaps chose not to mention. There are faint marks on Jake's throat, so subtle they could easily be dismissed as natural discoloration. But to trained eyes, they look like fingerprints, as if someone had throttled him, though gently enough to leave no bruising. Combined with the source magic traces, this suggests a murder method that's both physical and magical, a combination of conventional strangulation, augmented by source to ensure death and minimize evidence. But before they can delve deeper into this discovery, Roberts drops another piece of information that changes the entire complexion of the case. I should mention, he says casually, as if discussing the weather, that Jake's body was stolen from my morgue yesterday evening. Whoever took it was quite professional, picked the locks, disabled my wards, removed the corpse without leaving any obvious evidence. I've reported the theft to Captain Aurelius, but with the siege, it's understandably not his highest priority. This revelation stops our heroes cold. Body theft is never a good sign, especially not when source magic is involved. Necromancy is one of the most common applications of corrupted source raising and controlling the dead, binding spirits to corpses, using the bodies of the deceased for dark purposes. If someone stole Jake's body, they likely intend to use it for exactly such purposes. Moreover, the theft suggests that the murderer is still in Cyseal, still active, still pursuing whatever agenda led to Jake's death in the first place. This isn't a case of motives like jealousy or revenge, at least not simple murder. The killer has a larger plan, something that requires not just Jake's death but his physical remains. And that plan is still in motion. Roberts provides them with a list of suspects who had the opportunity to steal the body. There's Mayor Cyseal, the city's highest official, who has access to most places in Cyseal. There's Captain Aurelius, who oversees the Legion and could have ordered the body moved without anyone questioning him. There's Evelyn, a young woman who serves as apprentice to Rivellon the healer, who would have both the knowledge and the opportunity. And there's Esmeralda, Jake's widow, who despite her apparent grief, might have her own reasons for wanting access to her husband's corpse. Our heroes decide to focus their investigation on Esmeralda first. She's the obvious starting point, the person closest to the victim, the one who discovered the body, the individual most likely to know Jake's secrets. They make their way to the house Esmeralda shared with Jake, a comfortable home in one of Cyseal's better neighborhoods. Esmeralda receives them with apparent wariness. She's a striking woman, younger than Jake was, dressed in mourning black that somehow emphasizes rather than diminishes her beauty. She answers their questions with careful precision, giving them nothing more than they specifically ask for. her body language suggesting someone hiding secrets behind a facade of cooperation. When asked about Jake's activities in the days before his death, Esmeralda admits that he had been troubled, distracted, working long hours on council business he wouldn't discuss with her. When pressed about enemies he might have made, she mentions that Jake had been investigating corruption within the city government, that he suspected someone was embezzling funds or perhaps involved in more sinister activities. But before he could present his evidence to the full council, he died. Our heroes request permission to search the house, and Esmeralda reluctantly agrees. What they find complicates the case further. In Jake's private study, hidden behind a false panel, they discover documents suggesting that Esmeralda herself had been conducting an affair with a city guard. There are love letters, romantic in nature, filled with passion and promises. The implication is clear: Esmeralda had motive to kill her husband, and as someone living with him, she certainly had opportunity. Confronted with this evidence, Esmeralda breaks down, tears streaming down her face. But her confession isn't what our heroes expected. Yes, she admits, I was seeing someone else. Jake and I. Our marriage had become a formality, a convenience. We stayed together for political reasons, but I didn't kill him. I swear I didn't. He was a good man despite everything. I would never have hurt him. She goes on to deflect suspicion toward Evelyn, the healer's apprentice. According to Esmeralda, Evelyn had been treating Jake for his various minor ailments, and she had access to substances that could cause death while appearing natural. Moreover, Esmeralda had seen Evelyn acting suspiciously in the days before Jake's death, carrying packages that she hid quickly when anyone approached. This lead takes our heroes to Theleron's healing clinic, where they find Evelyn tending to wounded soldiers from the siege. She's young, perhaps 20, with the focused intensity of someone dedicated to her craft. When they question her, she seems genuinely confused by their suspicions, insisting that she would never harm Jake or anyone else. Her entire purpose is to heal, not to hurt. But as they press her, cracks begin to appear in her story. She admits to having unusual healing stones, artifacts that seem to cure even the most serious wounds with remarkable speed. When asked where she obtained these stones, she becomes evasive, mentioning only that they came from someone named Loic, a healer in a distant town who belongs to a faith called the Immaculates. The Immaculates. Our heroes haven't heard this name before, but something about it sends a chill through them. There's a weight to the word, a significance that suggests this is more than just another minor cult or philosophical movement. They press Evelyn for more information, but she suddenly claims to remember an urgent errand and attempts to leave. Before she can escape, however, one of our heroes notices something. A faint shimmer around one of her pouches, the telltale sign of source magic contained within a physical object. They demand to see what she's carrying, and after a moment of resistance, Evelyn reveals one of her healing stones. The moment our hero touches the stone, reality shifts. The world seems to fold in on itself, and suddenly they're no longer in the healing clinic. They're standing in an impossible place, a fortress that exists outside of normal space and time, a location they somehow remember, despite never having been there before. This is the homestead, and its discovery marks a turning point in our investigation. What began as a simple murder case has just revealed itself to be something far more complex, far more dangerous, and far more significant than our heroes ever imagined. But let that revelation wait for now. Let it hang suspended in the twilight space between waking and sleeping. Feel yourself drifting, floating, moving between worlds as easily as our heroes just moved between reality and the homestead. There's no hurry. The mystery will still be there when you need it. For now, just breathe and sink and dream in the soft darkness of sleep. Let me tell you about Icara and Leandra, two sisters whose bond was so strong that magic itself could not fully separate them, whose love became tragedy through the cruel machinations of forces beyond mortal understanding. Listen and drift as their story unfolds. Long ago, before our source hunters began their journey, before Counselor Jake's murder set events in motion, there lived two sisters in the Lucula forest. This forest was and is a place of ancient magic, where the trees grow taller and more majestic than anywhere else in Rivellon, where the very air seems thick with enchantment. It was a perfect home for two children born with extraordinary gifts. Icara and Leandra were what the people of Rivellon call soul-forged. From their earliest days, they shared a connection that went deeper than ordinary sisterly bonds. They could sense each other's emotions, feel each other's pain, sometimes even share thoughts without speaking. This psychic link made them inseparable, two halves of a perfect whole, completing and complementing each other in every way. They lived alone in the forest for much of their childhood, raised by circumstances we need not delve into here, in this peaceful moment of rest. What matters is that they had each other, and they had the forest, and for a long time, that was enough. They cared for the animals, learned the ways of growing things, and developed magical abilities that allowed them to nurture and protect the natural world around them. Icara was the elder by only a few minutes, but those minutes seemed to carry weight in their relationship. She was more cautious, more thoughtful, always considering consequences before acting. Leandra was the passionate one, quick to love and quick to anger, feeling everything intensely and immediately. But despite their different temperaments, they balanced each other perfectly. Icara's caution tempering Leandra's impulsiveness, Leandra's passion breaking through Icara's overthinking. The sisters rarely interacted with other humans. They preferred their solitary existence, their communion with nature, their perfect understanding of each other. Why seek company elsewhere when they had everything they needed in their forest home? Why risk the complications that other people inevitably brought with them? But isolation, as perfect as it might seem, cannot last forever. The world has a way of intruding even into the most carefully maintained sanctuary. And for Icara and Leandra, that intrusion came in the form of a wizard named Zandalor. Zandalor is a figure of considerable importance in Rivellon's history, though our source hunters don't know this yet. He's ancient beyond reckoning, having lived through events that are merely legends to most people. He wanders the world on his own mysterious errands, sometimes helping those who need it, sometimes simply observing as history unfolds around him. And in his wanderings, he came to the Lucula forest and encountered two extraordinary young women. Zandalor recognized immediately what Icara and Leandra were. He saw their potential, understood the magnitude of their power, and appreciated the beauty of their bond. He also saw their isolation and understood its dangers. Power without wisdom, magic without context, could be as dangerous to the wielder as to anyone else. So he offered to teach them, to share his vast knowledge, to help them understand the true nature of their abilities. The sisters were wary at first. They had no reason to trust this strange wizard who appeared out of nowhere with his offers of knowledge and companionship. But Zandalor was patient, kind, and appeared genuinely interested in their well-being rather than in exploiting them. Slowly, they came to accept his presence, then to welcome it, and finally to depend upon it. Zandalor taught them many things: the history of Rivellon, the nature of magic, the delicate balance between different forces that kept the world functioning. He introduced them to literature and philosophy, to ideas and concepts they had never encountered in their isolation. And he did all this with genuine affection, treating them like the daughters he had never had, protecting them from dangers they didn't even know existed. But Zandalor, for all his wisdom and power and good intentions, made a critical mistake. He became not just a teacher and protector, but an object of affection. Both sisters, emerging from childhood into young adulthood, found themselves drawn to him in ways that went beyond gratitude or respect. And because they were soul-forged, because they could sense each other's emotions, each sister became acutely aware of the other's feelings. For Icara, who had always been the more reserved of the two, this created a terrible internal conflict. From what we can gather from how events unfold, she seems to have felt her own attraction to Zandalor growing, even as she sensed through their bond that Leandra felt the same. She appears to have tried to suppress her feelings, to deny them, to focus on their studies, and ignore the complicated emotions that threatened to disrupt the perfect balance she and her sister had always maintained. Leandra, true to her passionate nature, could not and would not deny what she felt. Based on her actions, it's clear she loved Zandelor deeply, and she saw no reason to hide or suppress that love. But through their soul-forged connection, she also knew that Icara felt the same way, and the knowledge created a wound that cut deeper than any physical injury could. Zandelor himself remained oblivious to the growing tension between the sisters. Or perhaps he was aware but chose not to acknowledge it, hoping the feelings would fade with time. Either way, he continued as he always had, teaching and protecting and caring for both sisters equally, showing no preference, no particular attention to one over the other. The crisis came when Zandelor and Icara, after years of working closely together, finally acknowledged their feelings for each other. It happened gradually, almost inevitably, a slow recognition of compatibility that deepened into genuine love. They didn't mean to hurt Leandra. They hoped, perhaps naively, that she would understand, that the bond between the sisters would prove strong enough to survive this complication. But for Leandra, the revelation was devastating beyond words. Based on what followed, she appears to have lost not just the man she loved, though that would have been painful enough in itself. Through the soul-forged connection she shared with Icara, she would have experienced her sister's happiness, felt Zandelor's love for Icara, lived through every moment of their growing closeness as if it were happening to her. She couldn't escape it, couldn't block it out, couldn't find any refuge from the constant awareness of her sister's joy and her own pain existing simultaneously in her consciousness. It appears she tried to endure it. The evidence of what happened next suggests she truly did try. From what we can piece together, she smiled when Zandelor and Icara were together, congratulated them on their happiness, pretended that her heart wasn't breaking with every breath. But the soul-forged connection made such pretense futile. Icara knew exactly how much Leandra was suffering, could feel her sister's agony as clearly as if it were her own, and that knowledge, that awareness of the pain she was causing, created its own special torture for Icara. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, Leandra made a decision. She would leave. Distance herself physically from her sister and Zandelor, perhaps hoping that with enough space, the soul-forged connection might weaken, that she could find some peace away from the constant reminder of what she had lost. She left in the night, without warning, without goodbye, simply disappearing into the darkness beyond the Luculla forest. Icara woke to find her sister gone, and felt as if half of her soul had been ripped away. Through their connection, she could sense Leandra's anguish, her desperate flight, her determination to escape, even though escape from a soul-forged bond was ultimately impossible. Icara wanted to follow, to bring her sister back, to somehow make things right. But how could she? What could she say that would heal the wound that had been opened? How could she choose between her love for Zandelor and her love for her sister? Zandelor, who seems to have been guilt-stricken and angry at himself for not recognizing the danger sooner, also considered pursuit. But he appears to have understood that his presence would only make things worse. He was the source of the conflict. His appearance would solve nothing. So he let Leandra go, perhaps hoping that time and distance would allow her to heal, would somehow make possible a reconciliation that seemed impossible in the present moment. But Leandra, alone in her pain, vulnerable in her heartbreak, seems to have attracted exactly the wrong kind of attention. In her moment of greatest weakness, something found her. Something that fed on suffering, that saw opportunity in her anguish. An entity known as the Trife. The Trife is difficult to describe, especially here in the gentle darkness where you rest. It's not quite a demon, though it's certainly demonic in its intentions. It's more like a concept given form, an idea made manifest. The idea that existence itself is the source of all suffering. That true peace can only come through the ending of all things. The Trife doesn't rage against reality or seek to destroy through violence. Instead, it whispers, it suggests. It plants seeds of thought that grow into terrible convictions. It found Leandra in her darkest moment and spoke to her with false compassion. You suffer because you exist, it said. Because you love and can lose what you love. Because you feel and can be hurt by what you feel. But what if there was a way to end all suffering? not just yours, but everyone's. What if existence itself is the disease and non-existence the only cure? Leandra, her judgment seemingly clouded by pain and loneliness, listened. The Trife painted pictures in her mind of a universe without suffering, without loss, without the terrible complexities of emotion and desire. It showed her visions of peace, the absolute peace of nothingness, where there is no pain because there is no one to experience pain. And slowly, terribly, Leandra appears to have begun to believe. The Trife told her of the Void Dragon, an entity of pure entropy, imprisoned beyond reality, constantly fighting against Astarte, the goddess of life. It told her that if the Void Dragon could be released, if it could fulfill its purpose and consume all of existence, then suffering would finally end. Everyone would be freed from the burden of consciousness, the agony of existence, the endless cycle of loss and pain. And to achieve this, Leandra would need to access something called the God Box, an artifact that held the key to releasing the Void Dragon. The God Box was hidden in the first garden, a realm accessible only through the homestead, a place between places that could be reached using magical artifacts called starstones. Under the Trife's influence, Leandra dedicated herself to this terrible purpose. She created the Immaculates, a cult that would serve her needs, providing resources and manpower for her plans. She learned necromancy, using corrupted source magic to raise the dead and bind them to her will. She developed the Death Knights, nearly indestructible undead warriors forged from a combination of necromancy and a toxic metal called tenebrium, and she began systematically creating bloodstones, corrupted versions of the starstones she would need to access the first garden. Each bloodstone required a ritual sacrifice, the binding of a soul to corrupt the pure magical energy of a starstone. It was terrible work, but Leandra seems to have convinced herself it was necessary, that these individual deaths would be justified by the universal peace that would follow. Back in the Luculla forest, Icara sensed what was happening to her sister through their soul-forged bond. She felt Leandra's transformation from heartbroken girl to convinced zealot, felt the corruption of the Trife's influence, felt the growing darkness where once there had been light. She tried reaching out through their connection, tried pulling Leandra back from the abyss, but Leandra had closed herself off, building walls in her mind to keep Icara out. Zandalor worked tirelessly to find some way to help, to undo the damage that his relationship with Icara had inadvertently caused. He researched ancient texts, sought out forgotten lore, tried to understand the Trife, and how its influence might be countered. He discovered information about the homestead, about the Void Dragon, about the cosmic threat that Leandra's pain had led her to serve, and he realized with growing horror that one woman's heartbreak had become a threat to all of existence. The siege of Cyseal, the murder of Councillor Jake, the attacks by orcs and undead, all of these were pieces of Leandra's larger plan. She was gathering resources, eliminating obstacles, preparing for her final assault on the first garden, and the Immaculates, her cult of destruction, were spreading throughout Rivellon, recruiting followers and creating bloodstones, each one bringing her closer to achieving her terrible goal. But even as she worked toward universal annihilation, Leandra never completely severed her connection with Icara. Deep within her corrupted consciousness, the love she felt for her sister remained, twisted and painful, but not entirely destroyed. And it was this remaining thread of connection, this last remnant of her former self, that would provide the only possible path toward redemption. Icara became known as the White Witch, a guardian of the Luculla forest, watching and waiting for any opportunity to reach her sister, to somehow break through the Trife's influence and restore the bond that had once made them whole. She knew that killing Leandra might be necessary to stop her plans, but she hoped desperately for another way, for some method of saving her sister, while also saving the world. And now, with two source hunters stumbling into this ancient tragedy through their investigation of a simple murder, perhaps that opportunity had finally arrived. Perhaps these warriors, trained to fight corruption in all its forms, could succeed where Icara and Zandalor had failed. Perhaps they could reach Leandra before it was too late, before the Void Dragon was released, before existence itself came to an end. But that confrontation is still to come, still ahead in our story. For now, Let the tragedy of two sisters wash over you gently. Let it carry you deeper into dreams, where love and loss intertwine, where nothing is simple and everything carries weight. Breathe slowly, drift peacefully. The story continues, but you need not follow every word. Just let it flow through you like water, like wind, like time itself. In the quiet space of your rest, let's speak now of the Immaculates, this cult that Leandra created to serve her dark purpose. Understanding them will help us understand the full scope of what our source hunters face. So listen gently as we explore this shadow that has fallen across Rivellon. The Immaculates present themselves as a religious order, devoted to the pursuit of spiritual purity and the healing of the world's suffering. Their temples are clean and well-maintained. Their priests and priestesses speak in soft, comforting tones, and their public works caring for the sick, feeding the hungry appear genuinely benevolent on the surface. To the casual observer, they seem to be exactly what they claim, a faith organization dedicated to making Rivellon a better place. But beneath this facade of righteousness lies something far darker. The Immaculates are Leandra's tool, carefully shaped to serve her ultimate goal of universal annihilation. Every aspect of their organization, from their theology to their recruitment practices, is designed to gather the resources and followers she needs to access the first garden and release the void dragon. The cult's theology is built on a simple but insidious premise: that suffering is inherent to existence, that as long as life continues, pain is inevitable. They teach that the cycle of birth, growth, suffering, and death is a trap from which there is no escape within the bounds of normal existence. True peace, they claim, can only be found in transcendence, in moving beyond the limitations of physical reality into a state of perfect, eternal serenity. What they don't tell their followers is that this transcendence means complete annihilation, the ending not just of individual consciousness but of existence itself. The Immaculates believe they're working toward paradise, but they're actually serving entropy, helping to bring about the very end they've been taught is salvation. Leandra, operating under the title of the Conduit, rarely shows herself to her followers. She remains hidden, communicating through intermediaries, maintaining an air of mystery that only enhances her authority. Her subordinates speak of her in reverent tones, treating her pronouncements as divine revelation. And because she appears to genuinely believe in the righteousness of her cause, her conviction lends authenticity to the cult's message that pure deception never could. The Immaculates recruit primarily from among those who suffer, the sick, the poor, those who have lost loved ones or experienced trauma. These are people looking for answers, for comfort, for some way to make sense of their pain. The cult offers them exactly that, a framework for understanding suffering, a community of fellow believers, and the promise of eventual relief. Is it any wonder that desperate people accept what they're offered? Once recruited, members are gradually indoctrinated into deeper levels of the cult's true nature. New initiates are taught only the surface theology, that the Immaculates seek to heal the world, to reduce suffering through compassion and service. But as members prove their dedication, they're exposed to darker truths. They learn about the corruption of source magic, about the cosmic forces that threaten reality, about the necessity of sacrifice to achieve transcendence. The word sacrifice is key to understanding the Immaculates' operations. They perform regular rituals that they claim will purify source magic and heal the corruption that has infected it. These rituals require volunteers, members who are willing to give their lives for the greater good, to become martyrs for the cause. And because the cult has carefully selected vulnerable, desperate people and indoctrinated them with the belief that death is not an ending but a transcendence, they have no shortage of volunteers. But these rituals aren't actually healing source magic. They're creating bloodstones, corrupted versions of the starstones that Leandra needs to access the first garden. Each ritual involves binding a soul to a starstone using necromantic magic, a process that kills the volunteer and corrupts the pure magical energy of the stone. The resulting bloodstone can still be used to unlock areas of the homestead, but at a terrible cost, both the life sacrificed and the further corruption of the magical forces that maintain reality. The Immaculates have established operations throughout Rivellon, though they concentrate their efforts in certain strategic locations. In Cyseal, where our story begins, they've infiltrated various levels of society. Rivellon, the healer's apprentice, is one of their agents, using her position to identify potential recruits and gather intelligence about the city's defenses. The cultists among the attackers besieging the city are Immaculates, coordinating with the orc mercenaries Leandra has hired to create chaos that distracts from her true purposes. But their most extensive operation is in the Lucula region, where they've taken control of ancient mines that contain deposits of tenebrium. This toxic metal has unusual properties. It can harm entities that are normally invulnerable, including the Void Dragon and Astarte herself. Leandra mines the tenebrium to create her Death Knights, binding undead warriors to suits of armor forged from the cursed metal, making them nearly indestructible. The mines are a horrific place, worked by slaves and undead laborers both, filled with toxic fumes that slowly poison anyone exposed to them. The Immaculates who oversee the operation treat their workers as disposable resources, working them until they die and then raising them as undead to continue laboring. It's slavery extending beyond death, a perversion of everything natural and right within the deepest chambers of the mines. Leandra has established her sanctum, a workshop where she conducts her darkest experiments, perfecting the necromantic techniques she'll need for her final assault on the First Garden. Here, surrounded by the corpses of her victims and the artifacts of her dark magic, the woman who was once Icara's beloved sister has become something barely recognizable as human. The Death Knights she creates are her greatest achievement and her most terrible weapon. These undead warriors are bound to her while absolutely incapable of disobedience or doubt. They feel no pain, no fear, no mercy. They can be damaged but not truly destroyed through conventional means, their armor of tenebrium, protecting them even from magical attacks that would obliterate normal foes. An army of these creatures, properly deployed, could conquer all of Rivellon, establishing the dominion of undeath that would be Leandra's final step before accessing the God Box. But Leandra understands that even Death Knights have weaknesses, and she's not so consumed by her obsession that she's become completely reckless. She's been developing a failsafe, a way to make the Death Knights vulnerable if they should ever be turned against her. This failsafe is alchemical in nature, derived from her own blood combined with specific magical reagents. If deployed correctly, it would strip the Death Knights of their invulnerability, making them susceptible to normal weapons and magic. She keeps this failsafe in her sanctum, hidden and heavily guarded, insurance against betrayal or loss of control. She doesn't expect to ever need it. After all, the Death Knights are bound to her will, incapable of rebelling. But she's experienced too much loss in her life to trust in anything absolutely. She plans for contingencies, prepares for possibilities, even as she works toward what she believes is an inevitable victory. Our source hunters, following the trail of evidence from Cyseal, will eventually find their way to these mines. They'll navigate the toxic tunnels, avoid or fight the Death Knights patrolling the depths, and ultimately confront Leandra in her sanctum. And in that confrontation, they'll discover the failsafe that will prove crucial to any hope of defeating the undead army Leandra has created. But that's still ahead in our story, still coming, but not yet here. For now, just understand that the Immaculates are more than just another cult, more than just another group of misguided fanatics. They're a sophisticated organization built on lies and manipulation, serving a cause that would end not just their own existence, but the existence of everything. And they're spread throughout Rivellon, working in the shadows, preparing for the day when their conduit will finally achieve her dark purpose. Let that weight settle on you gently now, not as a burden, but as understanding. Feel the gravity of what our heroes face, even as you sink deeper into the lightness of sleep. The Immaculates work in darkness, but you rest in peace. They serve ending, but you serve rest. And in rest, there is renewal. In sleep, there is healing. So breathe and drift. And let the story continue without you needing to hold on to every detail. Now we come to a place that exists outside of places, a time that exists beyond time. Let me tell you about the homestead, and as I do, let your consciousness drift as freely as the homestead itself drifts through the spaces between reality. When our source hunters first touch that bloodstone, the one they find in Evelyn's possession, or perhaps discover elsewhere in their investigation, they experience something that defies easy explanation. Reality folds, the world shifts, and suddenly there's somewhere else. Somewhere that is simultaneously everywhere and nowhere, every when and never. The homestead is a fortress, but not of stone and mortar. Its walls are made of crystallized time. Its towers reach into dimensions that human eyes shouldn't be able to perceive. The architecture shifts subtly when you're not looking directly at it, adapting to the needs and perceptions of whoever walks its halls. It's beautiful in a way that makes the heart ache, terrible in a way that inspires awe rather than fear. Our heroes arrive in what appears to be a central courtyard, though courtyard is too mundane a word for this space. The sky above, it can be called a sky, shifts through colors that don't quite exist in the normal spectrum. The ground beneath their feet feels solid, but somehow also feels like standing on the surface of deep water, stable yet yielding. And in the center of this impossible space stands a woman unlike any they've ever encountered. The Weaver of Time introduces herself with quiet dignity. She's ancient. You can see it in her eyes, which have witnessed the birth and death of stars, the rise and fall of civilizations, the slow grinding of cosmic forces that mortal minds can barely conceive. But she's also kind, patient in the way that only those who have infinite time can truly be patient. "Welcome," she says, and her voice seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "To the homestead. You have found your way here sooner than I expected, but then, time is flexible in this place. You are the source hunters, yes? The ones who will stand against the void." Our heroes, confused and disoriented by their sudden transportation, can only nod. The Weaver smiles, a sad expression that carries the weight of foreknowledge. She knows how this story ends. All of its possible endings, perhaps. She exists at what she calls the end of time, a place where past, present, and future converge, where she can observe the flow of temporal events, like someone watching a river from its bank. "I have much to tell you," she continues, "and you have much to learn. But first, let me explain where you are and why you are here." The homestead, she explains, exists outside normal reality as a sanctuary and staging ground for a mission of cosmic importance. Long ago, though, long ago, has little meaning in a place beyond time. It was established by the ancient guardians who first imprisoned the void dragon. These guardians understood that the dragon might someday escape, or that someone might try to release it, and they created the homestead as insurance against that possibility. The starstones our heroes have been encountering are keys to the homestead. Each one unlocks a new area, revealing more of the fortress and more of the knowledge stored within it. These stones are more than just magical artifacts. They're crystallized memories, fragments of knowledge and power from the ancient guardians who created them. As our heroes collect more starstones and use them to unlock the homestead, they're actually recovering lost memories, piecing together a history that has been deliberately hidden. The Weaver introduces them to Zigzax, her assistant, a demon, which might normally be alarming, but Zigzax is bound to serve the Weaver and through her, the cause of preserving existence. He's enthusiastic and talkative, in stark contrast to the Weaver's measured calm, and he provides more practical information about how the homestead functions and what our heroes will need to do. "You need more starstones," Zigzax explains, his voice carrying an accent that suggests origins far from any human realm. "The bloodstones you've found, those corrupted stones created through sacrifice, they work too, though they make the Weaver sad. Each stone you bring here will unlock new areas, new knowledge, new tools you'll need for the fight ahead." The fight ahead. The confrontation with the void dragon that threatens to consume all of existence. The Weaver explains this threat in terms our heroes can understand, though the full cosmic scope is perhaps beyond mortal comprehension. The void dragon is entropy incarnate, the antithesis of creation, the ultimate expression of the nothingness that existed before reality and yearns to exist again. For eons, it has been imprisoned beyond the material world, contained by barriers established by the ancient guardians. But those barriers are weakening. The corruption of source magic, the machinations of the Trife, and most immediately, the plans of Leandra, all of these threaten to break down the prison that holds the dragon. If Leandra succeeds in accessing the God Box in the first garden, if she manages to manipulate its cosmic forces as she intends, she will release the Void Dragon from its prison, and once free, it will devour time itself, consuming reality moment by moment until nothing remains. You must stop her, the Weaver says simply. You must gather the Starstones, unlock the secrets of the homestead, and prepare yourselves for the final confrontation. The path will not be easy. You will face terrible dangers, make difficult choices, perhaps lose things you hold dear. But you are the only hope reality has. You are, though you don't remember it yet, the reincarnations of the ancient guardians who first imprisoned the dragon. Your purpose, your very existence, has been leading to this moment. This revelation strikes our heroes like a physical blow. They're not just source hunters doing their duty, investigating a murder and hunting a criminal. They're cosmic guardians, reincarnated souls who once possessed godlike power, destined to face a threat that endangers everything. It's overwhelming, almost too much to process. And yet, some part of them, some deep, buried memory recognizes the truth in the Weaver's words. As they explore the homestead, using the Starstones they've already collected to unlock its initial areas, they begin to experience flashes of memory. They see themselves as they once were, powerful, immortal, standing watch over the God Box that contains the Void Dragon's prison. They remember eons of vigilance, of dedication to their sacred duty, and they remember their choice to give it all up, to strip away their divine power and become mortal, to earn back their status through heroic deeds rather than simply accepting it as their birthright. The homestead gradually reveals its treasures as more areas unlock. There's the Hall of Heroes where fallen companions can rest and where new allies can be recruited. There's the armory, filled with weapons and equipment from ages past, each item carrying its own history of heroes who wielded it. There's the library, containing books and scrolls that detail the history of Rivellon and the cosmic forces that shape reality. And there are training grounds, magical workshops, meditation chambers, everything the ancient guardians needed to prepare for their eternal vigil. Most importantly, the homestead provides a way to travel instantly between locations throughout Rivellon. Once our heroes have visited a place in the material world, they can return to the homestead and use its portals to jump back to that location instantly. This ability will prove crucial as their investigation expands, and they need to move quickly between distant regions. The Weaver and Zigzags become guides and mentors to our heroes, providing information, offering advice, sometimes cryptic and sometimes direct. The Weaver speaks in the measured tones of someone who has seen all possible futures and knows that some things must unfold in their own time. Zigzags is more immediately helpful, pointing out practical matters like where to find supplies or how to upgrade equipment. But both of them emphasize the same core truth. Our heroes must gather all the Starstones. Only with the complete collection can they access the first garden, where the God Box waits and where Leandra will eventually make her final play. Only by recovering all their lost memories and power can they hope to defeat the Void Dragon if it's released. The homestead is a sanctuary, yes, but it's also a training ground, preparing them for the ultimate battle that will determine the fate of all existence. And so our heroes return to the material world with new purpose. What began as a simple murder investigation has revealed itself to be the opening move in a cosmic conflict. Counselor Jake's death, the siege of Cyseal, the conspiracy of the Immaculates, all of these are connected to Leandra's plan to release the Void Dragon. And our heroes, once simple source hunters, must become something more if they hope to prevent the ending of everything. But even as they accept this burden, even as they commit themselves to the quest ahead, they carry a question with them. Why did they choose to give up their divine power? Why did they strip themselves of their memories and become mortal? The Weaver hinted that it was penance, that they felt they had failed in some way, but the full truth remains hidden, locked away in memories they have yet to recover. Let that question drift through your mind now, gentle and undemanding. Why would someone with ultimate power choose to become powerless? Why would immortal guardians choose mortality? The answer will come in time, as all answers do. For now, just let the mystery exist, peacefully unresolved, like a dream whose meaning you can't quite grasp, but which feels important nonetheless. The homestead waits outside time, patient and eternal, ready to receive our heroes whenever they return with new starstones, new knowledge, new understanding of their cosmic purpose. And you, drifting deeper into sleep, can visit your own inner homestead, that place of peace and safety that exists within you, beyond the reach of troubles or fears. Rest there now. Be still. Be peaceful. The story continues, but you need not follow. Just drift and dream, and let time itself become fluid and meaningless. In the gentle darkness of your rest, let me tell you about the companions who join our heroes on their journey. Each one carries their own burden, their own past, their own reasons for standing against the darkness. Listen, and let their stories blend with your dreams. First, there is Medora. Picture her. Strong, scarred, carrying herself with the rigid discipline of a warrior who has learned through terrible experience never to show weakness. She's a former source hunter herself, though she left the Order years ago after an incident she rarely speaks about. When our heroes encounter her, she's pursuing a personal vendetta, hunting an orc who once captured and tortured her, leaving her for dead in circumstances that still haunt her nightmares. The orc didn't just wound her body, he destroyed her eyes, leaving her blind and helpless. In her darkest moment, bleeding and broken, she grasped desperately at a strange red stone someone had given her, not knowing what it was, only knowing she didn't want to die in that filthy cell. The stone, a bloodstone, though she didn't know it then, healed her completely, restored her sight, mended her broken bones. It saved her life, but also bound her to the cosmic forces that drive our larger story. Medora's hatred of magic runs deep. She sees it as weakness, as something that corrupts and destroys those who rely on it. She trusts only in steel and strength, in discipline and determination. Yet she carries that bloodstone with her always, a contradiction she refuses to acknowledge. She needs our hero's help to track down her tormentor, and in exchange, she offers her considerable skill in combat and her knowledge of the region. Her personal quest for revenge runs parallel to the larger cosmic struggle. She represents the very human desire for justice and closure, the need to confront the specific evils that have harmed us personally rather than abstract threats to existence. As our heroes help her hunt her enemy, they learn valuable lessons about the nature of obsession, the cost of vengeance, and the importance of finding peace with the past. Then there is Jahan, the ancient wizard. So old that he remembers times our heroes have only read about in books, kept alive through dark magic and a pact with demonic forces he now regrets. Jahan is a study in contradictions, immensely knowledgeable yet filled with self-doubt, powerful yet vulnerable. What appears to be a genuinely good heart bound to evil through choices made long ago. He made his deal with the demon Balberith in a moment of desperation, trading years of service for the power and longevity he thought he needed to accomplish his goals. Like all such bargains, it seemed reasonable at the time. What are a few years of servitude compared to centuries of life? What is one's freedom compared to the good one could do with such power? But demons never honor the spirit of their bargains, only the letter, and Jahan has found himself trapped in service, far beyond what he originally agreed to. He seeks redemption, though he's not sure it's possible. Can someone who has dealt with demons, who has used dark magic for nearly a millennium, truly find salvation? He joins our heroes partly because their quest might offer a way to break free from Balberith's control, but also because fighting against cosmic evil feels like something that might balance the scales of his conscience, even if only slightly. Jahan's knowledge of ancient magic and demonic entities proves invaluable throughout the journey. He understands forces that even the Weaver of Time might not fully grasp, having dealt with them personally for so long. But his presence also serves as a constant reminder of how easily good intentions can lead to corruption, how the pursuit of power even for noble purposes carries inherent dangers. His personal quest, the king's dark deal, forces him to confront Balbrith directly, to challenge the demon that has owned him for so long. Our heroes help him in this confrontation, and the outcome determines whether Jahan finds the redemption he seeks, or remains trapped in his cycle of supernatural servitude. It's a poignant storyline that explores themes of choice, consequence, and the possibility of change even after centuries of mistakes. And then there is Beardota, perhaps the most unusual of the companions. Raised by bears in the wilderness, after being separated from human civilization as a young child, she possesses a natural immunity to tenebrium-induced rot that will prove crucial when exploring the cursed mines. But more than her practical utility, Beardota brings a completely different perspective to the Group 1, uncorrupted by society's expectations and prejudices. She has poor social skills, speaking bluntly and sometimes inappropriately, not understanding the subtle rules that govern civilized interaction. But this lack of social conditioning also means she sees truths that others miss, asks questions that no one else thinks to ask, and approaches problems with a directness that can cut through complications others get tangled in. She's loyal to a fault, treating those she cares about with the fierce protectiveness of a bear defending its cubs. Beardota learned about humanity from a wizard named Jareth, who found her in the wilderness and taught her language and basic civilization. She's searching for him now, hoping to rescue him from a witch named Aldegond, who has imprisoned him. Her quest to save her mentor represents her attempt to reconcile her wild nature with the civilized world, to honor both the bears who raised her and the human who educated her. Her story highlights the tension between civilization and wilderness, between learned behavior and natural instinct. She moves through the world with the grace of a predator and the innocence of someone untroubled by existential doubts. Where Medora sees weakness in magic and Jahan sees corruption in demonic power, Beardota simply sees tools that can be used for good or ill depending on the wielder's intentions. Each companion brings not just their combat abilities, but their unique worldviews, their personal struggles, their individual reasons for continuing even when the odds seem impossible. Together with our two source hunters, they form a fellowship united not by similarity, but by shared purpose. The desire to protect what they love from forces that would destroy it. Their interactions provide moments of levity in an otherwise dark story. Medora's rigid discipline clashes with Beardota's wild spontaneity. Jahan's verbose explanations frustrate companions who prefer action to philosophy. The source hunters themselves, partners who know each other so well that they sometimes complete each other's sentences, serve as a model of effective cooperation that the others gradually learn to emulate. But beneath the surface conflicts and personality clashes runs a deeper bond. These are people who have chosen to stand against impossible odds, to fight for a world that has often treated them poorly, to risk everything for people they'll never meet. That choice, that fundamental commitment to something greater than themselves, creates connections that transcend their individual differences. As they journey together through Rivellon, facing increasingly dangerous threats, they gradually become more than just allies. They become a found family, bound by shared trauma and shared triumph, by the knowledge that they're fighting a battle that few even know is being waged. When one falls, the others feel the loss keenly. When one succeeds, they all celebrate. Their victories are shared, as are their defeats. And when the final confrontation comes, when they stand together against the Void Dragon itself, it's not duty or destiny that keeps them fighting. It's the bonds they've forged, the relationships they've built, the knowledge that they're not facing the darkness alone. That's perhaps the greatest power they possess, greater even than the ancient magic they recover, or the divine nature they gradually remember. The power of chosen family, of people who decide to stand together because they care about each other and the world they're trying to save. Let these companions walk through your dreams now. Let Medora's fierce determination strengthen your rest. Let Jahan's patient wisdom guide your sleeping thoughts. Let Beardota's wild joy remind you of the simple pleasures of existence. They're not real, these characters from a game, but the truths they represent are very real indeed. The importance of companionship, the value of diverse perspectives, the strength that comes from unity despite difference. Feel yourself surrounded by allies as you sleep, protected by those who care about you, never truly alone even in the darkest moments. That's what our heroes discover, and what you can carry into your dreams. You're safe, you're protected, you rest in peace, guarded by love. Now we approach the heart of our story, the cosmic threat that drives all events, but we'll approach it gently, slowly, like walking carefully towards something powerful and dangerous. Let your consciousness drift as we explore the nature of the Void Dragon. Long before there was Rivellon, before there were gods or mortals or even the concept of time, there was nothing. Not the peaceful nothing of an empty room or a quiet night, but absolute nothing. The void that exists before creation, the emptiness from which all things must emerge or to which all things must eventually return. And in that nothing, there was and is consciousness, not thought as we understand it, but something older and stranger, the Void Dragon. To call it a dragon is perhaps misleading. It has no body, not really. It's more like a concept given form, an idea made manifest through the power of those who perceive it. When Astarte fights it in the spaces beyond reality, it appears to her as a massive dragon because that's a form she can comprehend, something that matches her understanding of cosmic threats. But others might see it differently. As a black hole, as a spreading infection, a simple absence slowly consuming presence. What matters is not its form but its purpose. The Void Dragon exists to unmake. Not to destroy in the violent sense, but to return all things to the primordial state of non-existence from which they came. It doesn't hate life or creation. Hatred requires passion, and the Void Dragon is beyond such mortal emotions. It simply follows its nature, which is entropy, dissolution, the ending of all things. For eons beyond counting, the Void Dragon was imprisoned. The ancient guardians, our heroes in their first lives, though they don't remember this, yet established barriers that kept it contained in the spaces between reality. These barriers weren't physical or even magical in the traditional sense. They were more like rules, fundamental laws woven into the fabric of existence itself, stating simply that the Void Dragon could not cross from its realm into the material world. It could rage against these barriers, test them, probe for weaknesses, but it could not break them, not alone. The God Box served as the linchpin of these barriers. This artifact simultaneously existing in many places and no places, in all times and no time, anchored the fundamental laws that kept the Void Dragon imprisoned. As long as the God Box remained intact and properly maintained, the barriers would hold. The Void Dragon would remain trapped, able to observe reality but unable to interact with it, like someone forever pressed against a window they can never break. But the ancient guardians, for all their power and dedication, made a crucial error. They entrusted the God Box to Astarte, the goddess of life. This seemed logical. She was a divine being, powerful and benevolent, devoted to creation and growth. Who better to guard the ultimate weapon against entropy and destruction? They didn't account for Astarte's fundamental nature, which was compassion without limit, mercy without boundary. The Trife, that entity of malevolent cunning, understood Astarte's weakness perfectly. It couldn't break the barriers through force, couldn't corrupt the ancient guardians, couldn't access the God Box directly. But it could manipulate. It could whisper. It could plant seeds of doubt and nurture them into terrible decisions. And so it approached Astarte with a simple question. What if the Void Dragon could be redeemed rather than imprisoned? The idea appealed to everything Astarte believed. She was the goddess of life, yes, but also of forgiveness, of second chances, of transformation. She had seen countless beings change over the eons, had witnessed redemption in even the darkest souls. Why not the Void Dragon? Why not try to heal this cosmic wound rather than simply containing it forever? Imprisonment seemed cruel when redemption might be possible. The Trife nurtured this idea carefully, never pushing too hard, always presenting it as Astarte's own thought. She meditated on the question for years, decades, perhaps centuries. Time moves strangely for divine beings, and eventually, convinced that her power as the goddess of life could transform even the embodiment of entropy itself, she opened the god box. The moment she did, the void dragon emerged. Not fully, the barriers still existed, weakened but not destroyed. But enough of it escaped to take on physical form in the spaces beyond reality, to become something Astarte could actually confront. She immediately understood her mistake. This wasn't a being that could be redeemed or transformed. It wasn't even truly a being in the way she understood the term. It was a force of nature, as fundamental and unchangeable as gravity or time. She tried to close the god box, to re-establish the barriers, but it was too late. The void dragon had tasted freedom, had found the crack in its prison, and it would not willingly return. So Astarte did the only thing she could. She engaged it in direct combat, using her divine power to hold it at bay, to prevent it from entering the material world, where it would begin its work of universal dissolution. That battle has continued ever since, through time periods so long that mortal minds cannot truly comprehend them. Astarte and the void dragon, locked in eternal combat in the spaces between reality, neither able to overcome the other. She can't destroy it. Entropy is as fundamental to existence as creation, and destroying one would unbalance everything. It can't overcome her. She's constantly drawing upon the life force of all living things in the material world, a renewable source of power that matches the void dragon's endless hunger. But this stalemate cannot continue forever. Astarte grows weary. Eons of unbroken combat have diminished her, worn away at her divine essence. The void dragon, being entropy itself, doesn't tire in the same way. It's patient. It can wait. It knows that eventually, Astarte will falter, her power will fail, and in that moment, it will break through into the material world. And once it enters reality fully, once it begins consuming time itself, there will be no stopping it short of universal annihilation. This is the cosmic threat that hangs over all of Rivellon, though almost no one knows it. Life continues as normal births and deaths, loves and losses, the small dramas that make up individual existence. But beyond the edge of perception, beyond the comfortable reality everyone assumes is stable, a goddess fights desperately to hold back an entity that would unmake everything. And she's losing. Slowly, inexorably, she's losing. Leandra's plan would accelerate this process catastrophically. By accessing the God Box and manipulating its cosmic forces, she intends to break down the remaining barriers completely. This would release the Void Dragon fully, allowing it to enter the material world with all its terrible power. Astarte, exhausted from eons of combat, would be unable to stop it. And the universal peace Leandra believes she's working toward, the ending of all suffering through the ending of all existence, would begin. This is why the stakes of our story are so impossibly high. This isn't about saving a city, or a kingdom, or even a world. It's about preserving existence itself. If our heroes fail, if Leandra succeeds in her plans, reality ends. Not in fire or violence or catastrophic destruction, but in simple dissolution. Everything that is would slowly cease to be, consumed by the Void Dragon moment by moment, until nothing remains but the absolute nothing that existed before creation began. But our heroes don't fully understand this yet. They know there's a cosmic threat, yes. The Weaver has explained the danger in general terms. But the full weight of what they're fighting against, the truly universal scope of the catastrophe they must prevent, hasn't quite sunk in. That realization will come later, when they finally access the first garden and see the God Box for themselves, when they witness Astarte's exhaustion and understand how close to failure she truly is. For now, as they journey through Rivellon gathering starstones and uncovering pieces of the conspiracy, they focus on more immediate concerns. Stop the Immaculates. Find Leandra. Prevent her from accessing the first garden. These are concrete goals, achievable objectives. The larger implications, the cosmic stakes, remain somewhat abstract, easier to understand intellectually than to truly feel in one's bones. But that will change. It always does. When you fight against ultimate evil, when you stand between reality and oblivion, eventually the weight of what you're doing becomes impossible to ignore. Our heroes will feel that weight soon enough, and when they do, they'll understand why the ancient guardians, their former selves, chose to strip away their divine power and become mortal, not as punishment, but as necessity. Divine power alone wasn't enough to stop the Void Dragon. Something more was needed, something that could only be earned through the process of living, suffering, growing, and choosing to fight even without the certainty of victory. Let that weight rest lightly on you now, here in the safety of your rest. The Void Dragon threatens the characters in a story, not you. Your existence is secure, your reality stable. You can contemplate universal ending without fear because it's fiction, a tale told to help you drift into peaceful sleep. Let the cosmic scope of the threat lull you deeper into rest, knowing that you're safe from such impossibilities. The story continues, but you need not follow every word. Just let it flow over you, carrying you gently toward dreams. And now we come to the ending, the culmination of our journey. But we'll approach it gently, peacefully, letting each moment unfold in its own time. Breathe slowly as we walk together toward the final confrontation. Our heroes have gathered all the Starstones, unlocking the full extent of the homestead and recovering memories of their former divine nature. They've defeated Leandra's forces, obtained the failsafe that makes Death Knights vulnerable, and pieced together the full scope of the conspiracy. They understand now what they're truly fighting against, not just a cult or even a corrupted sorcerer, but the ending of existence itself. The path to the first garden opens before them, accessible now through the fully unlocked homestead. The Weaver of Time watches them prepare with sad, knowing eyes. She's seen how this story ends, or rather, how it might end. For even she cannot perceive futures with perfect certainty. The heroes stand at a branching point where multiple possible outcomes exist simultaneously, and their choices in the moments to come will determine which future becomes reality. Zigzags offers final encouragement, his usually jovial demeanor more subdued now. He knows, as they all do, that some of them might not return from the first garden. This is no ordinary battle they're preparing for, no conventional enemy they'll face. This is cosmic confrontation, the kind of fight that reshapes reality itself. Survival is not guaranteed. Victory is not certain. All they have is will, determination, and the bonds they've forged throughout their journey. Their companions, Medora, Jahan, Beardaughter, and any others they've gathered along the way prepare alongside them. These aren't just allies anymore. They're family, chosen and treasured, bound by shared struggle and mutual sacrifice. If this is to be their last battle, they'll face it together, standing shoulder to shoulder against impossible odds, as they've learned to do. The first garden, when they finally enter it, exceeds all their expectations. Imagine a place where life exists in its purest form, untouched by death or decay. Trees of impossible beauty reach toward a sky that shifts through colors no mortal eye should be able to perceive. Flowers bloom that release fragrances carrying memories of every joy ever experienced. Streams flow with water that seems to contain liquid light, nourishing everything it touches. But beneath this beauty lies something else, a sense of fragility, of imbalance, of a perfection that's about to shatter. The first garden exists at the boundary between creation and destruction, maintained only by Astarte's constant vigilance and the barriers anchored by the God Box. Those barriers are failing. The garden itself shows signs of corruption, patches of darkness, spreading through the perfection like ink-staining parchment. And there, at the heart of the garden, stands Leandra. She's almost unrecognizable from the young woman who fled the Lucula forest in heartbreak. Power crackles around her, corrupted source magic mixed with necromantic energy, and something darker still, the influence of the Trife, twisted into her very soul. Yet traces of her former self remain visible in her eyes, in the set of her shoulders, in the way she carries herself. She's become a monster, but she remembers being human. Icara is there too, having followed her sister through paths only she could navigate. The soul-forged bond between them, though strained and damaged, still exists. Even now, corrupted as Leandra has become, Icara can feel her sister's emotions, sense the conflict raging within her. Part of Leandra wants to stop, wants to turn back from the abyss she's approaching, but the Trife's influence runs too deep, its promises of universal peace too seductive, for her to change course on her own. Our heroes, if they've gathered the necessary artifacts and knowledge during their journey, have a choice here. They can attempt to redeem Leandra, using the Soulforge connection to reach through the corruption and remind her of who she truly is. This is difficult, dangerous even, requiring them to lower their defenses and open themselves to the very forces they've been fighting against. But it offers the possibility of ending this conflict without further violence, of saving a soul that's been twisted but not completely destroyed. Alternatively, they can fight her directly, treating her as they would any other corrupted sorcerer, a threat to be eliminated for the safety of all. This path is more straightforward, more aligned with their training and purpose as source hunters, but it also means destroying someone who might have been saved, ending a life that corruption claimed but didn't completely consume. The choice they make here reflects everything they've learned throughout their journey. If they've embraced the possibility of redemption, if they've learned that even the corrupted might be saved, they'll attempt the restoration of the Soulforge. If they've remained rigid in their beliefs, seeing only threats that must be eliminated, they'll fight. Either path is valid, either choice understandable. There are no easy answers when facing corruption this profound. If they attempt redemption and succeed, the moment is beautiful and heartbreaking. Icara and Leandra's Soulforge connection, restored to its original strength, allows Leandra to see clearly for the first time in years. She perceives the full horror of what she's done, the scope of the destruction she's caused, the terrible lie the Trife told her. The universal peace she sought isn't peace at all, but annihilation. Not an ending of suffering, but an ending of everything that makes suffering meaningful: joy, love, growth, existence itself. She collapses, overwhelmed by guilt and grief, but also by relief. She's free now from the Trife's influence, able to think clearly again, able to remember who she was before corruption took hold. She and Icara embrace, tears flowing freely, two sisters reunited after a separation measured not just in years but in fundamental transformation. Dandela joins them, and for a moment, the three people whose love triangle began this tragedy find a sort of peace together. But if redemption fails or isn't attempted, the battle is terrible. Leandra fights with desperate fury, using every ounce of her corrupted power to destroy those who would stop her. She summons Death Knights to aid her, raises undead creatures from the very soil of the first garden, casts spells that warp reality around them. Our heroes must use everything they've learned, every skill they've developed, every advantage they've prepared to overcome her. The fight is long and exhausting, pushing everyone to their absolute limits. Companions fall and must be revived. Resources are depleted. Injuries accumulate. But eventually, through teamwork and determination, and perhaps a bit of luck, they overcome her. Leandra falls, her corrupted form dissolving as the necromantic magic sustaining her fails. In her final moments, if our heroes listen carefully, they might hear her whisper an apology, not just to them, but to Icara, to Zandalor, to everyone she hurt in pursuit of her twisted vision of peace. But Leandra's defeat, whether through redemption or destruction, doesn't end the threat. The Trife, that entity that manipulated her into this course of action, still exists. And worse, Leandra's actions have weakened the barriers holding the Void Dragon enough that it can force its way into the first garden, even without the God Box being fully opened. The earth shakes, the sky tears, and through the rents in reality steps something that defies description. The Void Dragon itself, freed at last from its eternal prison. Astarte appears, manifesting in the first garden in her full divine glory. She's beautiful beyond words, terrible in her power, but also clearly exhausted. Eons of combat have worn her down to almost nothing. She's been fighting the Void Dragon alone for so long that she barely remembers what peace feels like. And now, in the moment when she should be able to rest, when the threat should be contained, it's worse than ever. I cannot defeat it alone, she tells our heroes, her voice carrying the weight of cosmic weariness. I have held it at bay for eons, but my strength is failing. If you do not act now, if we cannot work together to drive it back, existence itself will end. Everything that is will cease to be. Everything that is will cease to be. The final battle begins. The Void Dragon is massive, terrible, its very presence causing reality to destabilize around it. It doesn't attack with fire or claws, though it has both, but with simple negation. Where it steps, things cease to exist. When it breathes, time itself stutters and fails. Fighting it isn't a matter of dealing damage in any conventional sense, but of maintaining reality in its presence, of asserting that existence has meaning and value against a force that denies both. Our heroes fight alongside Astarte, combining mortal determination with divine power. Their companions support them, each contributing their unique abilities to the battle. Medora's iron discipline keeps everyone focused. Jahan's knowledge of arcane forces allows them to counter the Void Dragon's reality-warping abilities. Beardota's wild instinct helps them anticipate the creature's movements. And the two Source Hunters, remembering now their former selves as cosmic guardians, tap into power they thought they'd lost forever. The battle rages on, impossible to measure in terms of time, because time itself becomes fluid in the Void Dragon's presence. Moments stretch to eternities, or perhaps eternities compressed to moments. The heroes fight and fall and rise again, pushed beyond anything they thought possible, surviving through pure will when their bodies should have failed long ago. Astarte, drawing upon the life force of all living things in Rivellon, maintains barriers that prevent the Void Dragon from expanding beyond the First Garden. If it escapes into the material world, all is lost. She holds the line, paying for each moment with portions of her divine essence, slowly sacrificing herself to buy our heroes time to find a way to stop this thing. And finally, through some combination of skill, luck, divine intervention, and sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat, they succeed. The Void Dragon, damaged beyond its ability to maintain physical form, begins to dissipate. But its not destroyed entropy cannot be destroyed, for it's as fundamental to existence as creation itself. Instead, it must be contained again, imprisoned as it was before, sealed away where it cannot threaten reality. The God Box, damaged by Leandra's manipulations but still functional, provides the means. Astarte, using the last of her strength, binds the Void Dragon within the artifact once more, re-establishing the barriers that will keep it imprisoned. But she knows, and our heroes know, that this solution is only temporary. The barriers will weaken again over time. Someone must maintain constant vigilance, must stand ready to reinforce them when needed. I will continue my watch, Astarte says, her voice faint now, most of her divine essence consumed in the final binding. I have fought the Void Dragon for eons. I can fight it for eons more. This is my burden, my responsibility. I opened the God Box when I should not have. I will pay the price of that mistake for all eternity if necessary. She seals herself within the God Box alongside the Void Dragon, resuming the eternal combat she's been waging in the spaces between reality. She'll continue fighting, forever if necessary, holding entropy at bay, so that creation can flourish. It's a sacrifice beyond comprehension, choosing eternal struggle over peace, choosing duty over rest, choosing to suffer forever so that others need not suffer at all. Our heroes witness this sacrifice with profound respect and sorrow. They've saved existence itself, yes, but the price was paid by someone else. Astarte will never know peace, never rest, never escape the burden she accepted. And they know, remembering their former selves now, that they once made a similar choice to strip away their divine power and become mortal, to accept limitation and loss in service of something greater than themselves. But Astarte's final words to them, before she seals herself away, carry a warning. She reveals that other gods, cosmic beings of power and influence, knowingly allowed Source to become corrupted. They stood by and did nothing as the crisis unfolded, perhaps even orchestrated events to serve their own mysterious purposes. The cosmic order our heroes have fought to preserve may itself be fundamentally flawed, maintained by beings who are not as benevolent as they appear. This revelation casts their victory in shadow. They've saved existence, yes, but they've also learned that the very structure of reality may be unjust, that the gods who should protect and guide may instead manipulate and control. What does it mean to be a guardian when those you thought were allies might actually be enemies? What responsibility do they have now, armed with this knowledge? The first garden, emptied of its cosmic combatants, begins to heal. The corruption fades. Beauty returns. Our heroes stand among impossible flowers and ancient trees, victorious but changed. They've succeeded in their mission. The void dragon is contained, existence preserved, the immediate threat neutralized. But they carry the weight of what they've learned, the knowledge that this victory is only one battle in a much longer war. They return to the homestead where the Weaver of Time waits. She knows what they've learned, has always known, exists at the end of time where all secrets are revealed. You have done well, she tells them simply. Existence continues because of your courage, but your work is not finished. It never truly is. Vigilance must be eternal. The watch must never end. Our heroes, no longer simple source hunters but fully realized cosmic guardians, accept this truth. They've remembered who they were, reclaimed their divine heritage, and proven themselves worthy of the responsibility that comes with such power. They'll continue standing watch, protecting reality from threats both mortal and cosmic, knowing that peace is a luxury they may never truly enjoy. And as they prepare to return to the material world, to resume their lives with this new understanding of their cosmic purpose, they carry one final gift, the knowledge that they don't stand alone. They have companions who fought beside them. They have each other, and somewhere, in the spaces between reality, Astarte maintains her eternal vigil, a reminder that sacrifice is sometimes necessary, that duty can demand everything, but that such sacrifice is never truly in vain. Let this ending wash over you now. Let it carry you deeper into peaceful rest. The heroes have won their victory. Existence continues. The watch is maintained. And you, safe in your bed, protected by the simple fact of reality's persistence, can drift into dreams knowing that sometimes, somewhere, heroes stand guard against the darkness, not in fiction alone, but in the everyday acts of courage and sacrifice that people perform all around you. Sleep now. The story is told. The heroes rest. And so can you. And so our journey through the world of Rivellon comes to its end. Or perhaps not an end, but a gentle fading, like twilight giving way to night. You've traveled far tonight, through ancient forests and cursed mines, through spaces between reality and battles beyond comprehension. And now it's time to let go completely, to surrender to sleep, to allow your consciousness to drift into the deeper rest you deserve. Think about what we've explored together tonight. The corruption of something pure, transformed into its opposite through external manipulation. The tragedy of sisters torn apart by circumstances beyond their control. The weight of cosmic responsibility falling on shoulders that once carried only mortal burdens. The importance of companions who stand together even when standing seems impossible. And ultimately, the necessity of sacrifice, of choosing duty over comfort, of protecting others even at great personal cost. These themes from Divinity Original Sin echo truths that resonate beyond any game, any story, any fiction. In your own life, you've experienced moments where something good became corrupted, where relationships were damaged by forces you couldn't control, where responsibilities felt overwhelming, where friends proved their worth in crisis. The specifics are different, but the patterns are universal. And that's why stories matter, why we tell them and listen to them, and let them shape our understanding. Our two source hunters began their journey as simple investigators, tasked with solving a murder in a port city. They ended it as cosmic guardians, having saved existence itself from annihilation. But in between those 2 points, they remained fundamentally themselves. They didn't become different people. They became more fully the people they always were. Their power increased, yes, but more importantly, their understanding deepened, their compassion expanded, their commitment strengthened. That's the real journey, isn't it? Not the acquisition of power or the achievement of grand victories, but the slow, steady process of becoming more complete versions of ourselves, of learning from our experiences, growing through our challenges, deepening through our connections with others. Whether we're fighting cosmic dragons or simply trying to make it through another day, the fundamental process is the same. Icara and Leandra's tragedy reminds us how easily love can turn to pain when complicated by external forces. But it also shows us that redemption is possible, that even the deepest corruption might be healed if approached with enough compassion and courage. Their story asks us to consider, what would we sacrifice for those we love? How far would we go to save someone who's lost their way? And perhaps most painfully, when is it necessary to let go, to accept that sometimes people choose paths we cannot follow? The Immaculates, with their promises of peace through ending, represent the dark seduction of nihilism, the temptation to solve the problem of suffering by eliminating existence itself. It's a philosophy that can seem almost logical when you're in pain, when suffering feels overwhelming and endless. But as our story shows, this solution is no solution at all. It's just giving up, dressed in philosophical language to make surrender seem like victory. True peace doesn't come from ending existence, but from accepting it, embracing both its joys and its sorrows, understanding that meaning emerges from the full spectrum of experience. The heroes fight not to eliminate suffering, that would be impossible, but to preserve the possibility of joy, growth, love, and all the other things that make suffering bearable and existence worthwhile. The companions who join our heroes model different approaches to trauma and loss. Medora's rigid discipline, Jahan's seeking redemption for past mistakes, Beardota's wild authenticity, each valid, each offering its own strengths and weaknesses. Together, they demonstrate that there's no single right way to cope, to heal, to move forward. We each find our own path, and we're strongest when we can appreciate and learn from paths different from our own. The Void Dragon, that cosmic embodiment of entropy and ending, isn't truly evil in any moral sense. It's simply following its nature, doing what entropy does. But nature unbalanced becomes catastrophe, and forces left unchecked become dangers. That's why vigilance matters, why boundaries matter, why sometimes we must fight against things that seem inevitable or natural. Not everything that exists should be allowed to flourish. Some things must be contained, controlled, kept in check, so that other things can grow. And Astarte's sacrifice, her choice to seal herself away forever in eternal combat with the Void Dragon, represents the highest form of heroism. Not the glory of victory, but the quiet endurance of duty. Not the celebration of triumph, but the acceptance of necessary suffering. She fights where no one can see her, endures where no one can thank her, sacrifices where no one can appreciate her loss. And she does it anyway, because someone must, because the alternative is too terrible to contemplate. We all have our own void dragons to fight, don't we? Personal demons that threaten to unmake us, habits or thoughts or fears that seek to return us to emptiness. And we all have our moments of standing watch, maintaining vigilance against threats that never completely disappear. The specifics vary, but the pattern is universal. Life requires constant effort, constant attention, constant choosing of existence over emptiness. But here's the beautiful truth that the story ultimately reveals. We don't fight alone. The source hunters have each other, have their companions, have the memory of Astarte's sacrifice to strengthen them. And we too have connections, communities, relationships that support us, even when we feel isolated, even in our darkest moments. Even when we feel we're facing the void alone, there are others standing watch alongside us, fighting their own battles against their own darkness, part of a greater fellowship of existence. So as you drift now towards sleep, carry this knowledge with you into your dreams. You are not alone in your struggles. Others face similar challenges, fight similar battles, carry similar burdens. And just as the heroes of our story found strength in their connections, so too can you find strength in yours. Let that thought comfort you as you sink deeper into rest. The story of Divinity Original Sin is over now, told completely, from beginning to end. But stories never truly end, do they? They continue in the minds and hearts of those who hear them, shaping thoughts and influencing choices long after the final words have been spoken. This story will stay with you, in ways both conscious and unconscious, a small part of the vast library of narratives that make you who you are. And now, it's time to let go completely, to release your grip on consciousness, and allow sleep to claim you fully. You're safe here in your bed, in your room, in this moment. The threats from the story are fictional, the dangers imaginary. Your existence is secure, your reality stable. You can rest without fear, knowing that the morning will come, that the world will continue, that you'll wake refreshed and ready for whatever tomorrow brings. Feel the weight of your body sinking deeper into the mattress. Notice how your breathing has slowed, how your muscles have relaxed, how your thoughts are becoming more dreamlike and less linear. This is good. This is right. This is your mind and body preparing for the deep, restorative sleep you need. Let the characters from our story drift away now. Icara and Leandra reunited or separated. The source hunters, victorious and transformed. Medora, Jahan, Beardaughter, each finding their own peace. Astarte, maintaining her eternal vigil. The Void Dragon, contained but never truly defeated. Let them all fade like mist in morning sunlight. Present but insubstantial. Part of your awareness, but not demanding your attention. And as they fade, as the story dissolves into the general background of memory and dream, feel yourself sinking deeper, deeper into comfort, deeper into rest, deeper into the peaceful darkness where sleep lives and dreams are born. You're so relaxed now, so comfortable, so ready to surrender to sleep. There's nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be, no thoughts you need to think. Just this moment, just this peaceful, gentle, perfect moment of letting go. The world of Rivellon exists in its fiction, preserved forever in the story we've told. The heroes stand watch in that fictional realm, protecting it from fictional threats. And you exist here, in reality, safe and secure, ready for sleep. So sleep now, deep and peaceful, let go completely, drift away into dreams. The story is told. The heroes rest. Existence continues. And so do you, safe, peaceful, sleeping. Good night.